The Future of Coaching is Team Coaching podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, an international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide.
We're your hosts, Georgina Woudstra and
Allard Jong, that's me.
We're coaches, writers, and the founders of the Team Coaching Studio.
In this series, we explore the exciting, dynamic, and fast-growing discipline of team coaching.
Our ambition is to contribute to the quality and impact of team coaching worldwide and to share insights and experience that will inspire you to keep developing as a team coach.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back for episode 4 in this series entitled The Future of Coaching is Team Coaching. I'm super excited to be here today, and I'll tell you why in just a second. Meanwhile, say hello to Georgina.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be back. Looking forward to the conversation today. This one's so important.
It is, isn't it? I feel like telling people that if they listen to only one episode in this series, they should make it this one.
I think that's a very good idea.
But then if they made it this far, they've probably already listened to the first 3. But yeah, why do you say this one's so important?
I do, as you know, I do a lot of supervision for team coaches, and we do a lot of reflective practice as well on our own team coaching. And when you step back and look at a team coaching case and the challenges that we can encounter, so much of it comes back to contracting. Whether those challenges we encounter are between the coach and the client, the team, as it were, or whether they are challenges in ourselves when we're triggered by situations, a lot of it could be supported better by more effective contracting. And yet I think the topic of contracting isn't well explored in team coaching.
No, there's almost like an 80-20 type kind of rule at play here, and I'm thinking about 80% of the success of our team coaching is down to proper contracting, but it only takes probably 20% of our time.
Yes,
and it's strange because it's about finding that middle ground, because not enough contracting, and you run into all kinds of situations such as the ones that you come in contact with regularly in your supervision sessions. And then too much contracting is probably not a good thing either, because that might stifle the whole unfolding of a process with the team. So
can stifle the natural flow of energy. And then the other thing is we can contract up front for all sorts of practical elements, but we can't contract for the psychological elements, the dynamics that will emerge throughout a team coaching program, throughout a team working together. We have no idea what will emerge. So some of this we can only contract for as we go along.
As they say in Scrabble, you can only play the board when it's your turn, isn't it?
I hadn't heard that. That's very good. Not being much of a Scrabble player myself.
So what do we mean by contracting? And different definitions out there, isn't there? Maybe spend a couple minutes just explaining what it is that we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we've got our own Team Coaching Studio definition, which is about the ability to understand what change is required and to agree with the team and all relevant stakeholders, the coaching process and the relationship.
Yeah.
But let's look at the AC definition.
Yeah. So the AC definition tells us that it's about creating a clear and agreed coaching agenda and contracting for how all parties will work together in line with coach's practice.
Yeah, beautifully articulated, isn't it? It's really clear what it's about, a clear and agreed coaching agenda and contracts for how all parties will work together. And that includes confirming who the client is, helping the team to agree coaching goals, outcomes and expectations. Yeah. It's about boundaries, responsibilities, commercial arrangements, all these sorts of things.
Yeah. It is, and then it's about recontracting with the team throughout the coaching, right? As this process evolves, as you just said, there's only so much you can contract for up front, and there's bound to be things that become apparent along the way, which we hadn't thought of.
That's right. So keeping that contract alive, it's not just something to be done at the front of a team coaching assignment. When we think about contracting, we often talk about big C and little c contracting.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about that. So how would you describe big C contracting?
Now that I hear the words in your mouth, I just want to point out that it's not about, big C being more important than little c. It's just, so let me explain. Yeah, because it almost sounds like, oh, this has a big C, so it must be more important than this one, because that only has a little c. But contracting with a big C, in our minds, and just for the sake of clarity, has to do with contracting for an entire team coaching engagement. So that may be a contract that will span, all of the work that we'll be doing over the next 3, 6, or 9 months, or whatever that time frame may be. So that's the overall contract.
So the overall big contract for the work.
Yeah.
And those of you who know our work might have encountered the 6 Ps framework, which is incredibly useful for thinking about contracting. So when we think about the 6 Ps, the first one stands for purpose. And I imagine that every team coach will think about this. Why team coaching? Why now? What's the change you're hoping to achieve through team coaching? And what's the picture of success, and how will it be measured? So that's the big why for team coaching.
And the first P of that big C contract, and then a second P could be practical, the practicalities. So how long is this program going to last? How many coaching sessions will we have? How long will they be? What are the fees? What are the logistics? What if any confidentiality boundaries are agreed? How or when may we involve different stakeholders in this multi-party kind of approach? So that's all grouped together under the heading of practical.
Practical, sometimes called administrative contract, yeah. And then something that we found is incredibly important in team coaching is the professional contract. And I think it's really important to be clear as team coaches what we are offering. Yeah? What do we mean by team coaching? And what's our approach? And what is it not? Just because we're using the same label, team coaching, as an organisational client or a sponsor contacting us about it, doesn't mean that team coaching means the same thing to both of us, especially as team coaching's a relatively new and emerging idea. So sometimes people think team coaching is facilitated workshops or away days, whereas I might be thinking about working more emergently. Well, those two things are very different methods and approaches. How competent are you? What's your area of competence? Should you, as a team coach, be agreeing to do work with a highly conflicted team that's got deeply ingrained conflict that maybe stems back for a very long time, deep rooted? Is your competence able to meet the needs of the team to work in those conditions? What's your definition and what's your methodology and approach? That's all about being professional as a team coach.
And then the next one, so after purpose, practical, and professional, the next one I'm fascinated by is this notion of power.
Oh yes.
All right. So whether we like it or not, but there's going to be a power structure. There's going to be a leadership structure. There's going to be a hierarchy in any team that you work with, whether the team has an official leader or not. Even the flattest, so to speak, of teams, have some form of power distribution. So it's important to agree with the team that you're working with. It's important to contract around what the leader's view is of their role as a leader, and how will you work together with the leadership of the team. Again, whether that's embodied by one person, or whether that's some form of shared leadership. Who else has authority, in this system? Is there anybody else that we need to be contracting with? Who will agree on the goals of the coaching? Is that a shared process of decision making by the team, or is that power to make decisions held by one specific person? And how does that impact the work that you foresee doing with them?
I think power is one of the most interesting and crucial aspects for contracting. Because let's say you ask a team, let's say there's a team of 8 or 10 people, you ask them at the beginning of a session, what do you want to focus on today? Unless the team has a decision-making norm, in other words, how do we go from many perspectives to one, then what we'll naturally find is each person coming up with their own view of what we need to focus on. And then we've got 8 or 10 views, but no means for reconciling that without us facilitating the team through some kind of voting process or whatever. But that decision-making team and that movement from many to one is so crucial in team functioning. So we need to know, who do we direct that to? In our questioning, do we ask the leader, we've heard from 8 people, or do we support the team in developing a decision-making process?
Yeah, so probably something we'll come back to in just a second, after when we segue into talking about the little C contract as well. The next one on the list is the psychological aspects, the psychological contract. And that's all about the hopes and expectations and the concerns and the fears and the all of those under the surface kind of rumbling points that may not be completely explicit yet, and therefore might be difficult to contract for.
Yeah, so the implicit hopes and needs and fears and concerns that can only be surfaced as we go through that work together. They get revealed, and that's why we can't contract clearly and firmly for all of that up front.
I like this question that I forgot the exact context, but we asked of a team the other day, which was, what we call it, the awesomeness test now, isn't it? The awesomeness test. So what are your deepest hopes for this in contracting? What are your deepest hopes for this coaching process, over the next few months? What would make this really, really awesome for you? I think that's one way to start to contract around expectations that the team needs to express.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And personally, I also really like to surface early on any resistance. I don't mean that resistance is negative. It's a natural human phenomena when faced with change or situations that we're uncertain about. So I like to ask, what concerns might you be holding, and to look at those together and see how we might hold those.
I love it. So after purpose, practical, professional, power, and psychological, the final of the 6 Ps.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come up with 7 Ps one day, but for now, the last one on the list is partnership.
This is about how we're going to work together. Who's responsible for what? How are we going to co-create the experience? And
it sounds a bit like a marriage contract, like for better or for worse. And by that I mean, how do we want to be together when the going gets tough as well?
That's a really important question to ask, because if you're doing real work with a team, really diving into where the needs are, very often things will get difficult. You want them to get difficult because that's often at the edge of their experience or what they've talked about or shared. So having some kind of protocol for how we're going to be together can really support the work, and means the coach isn't left choosing how to intervene, but we have some agreement around that.
So that kind of probably gives people enough to start thinking about the big C contract.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions that may come up in those initial kind of conversations and in the unfolding of the coaching of your work with the team. What if that's the big C contract? Then the little C contract, and I think you've already hinted at it a little bit when we talked about power just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
But the little C contract, the small C contract, is the contract is coming up, is setting an agreement for a particular coaching session, for example, a small unit of work.
Yeah, coaching session or part of a coaching session. If you've got a long session of several hours, may have several units of work, as we call it, within that coaching session. So many coaches listening to this, if they do individual coaching, will be really familiar with this kind of language of let's get a contract for our work together now. Part of the purpose of doing that is linked back to what we were talking about in an earlier podcast about our philosophy and stance. It's about creating partnership and mutuality and coming to some agreement around how we're going to work with the client, with the team in this case, for this particular unit of work.
Yeah. And I think every coach will kind of have their own questions to unearth that For those of you who know us, we've always appreciated the work of Clare Pedrick, for example, who came up with this STOKeRS kind of approach in one-on-one coaching. So she'll ask things like, what's this? What do we need to think about today as the subject? In the time, so that's the T. In the time that we have in these X number of minutes, what do we need to focus on? So that's kind of the right sizing bit. And then the O of STOKeRS is the outcome. What would you like to be different by the end of this conversation? And the K is for knowing. How will you know that we got what we needed? The R so there's no E, so it goes to the R, but the R for how roles. So how are we going to work together on this? How are we going to do this? What role do you want me to play, and what role are you playing in this? And then the S of STOKeRS is the word start. So where should we start? And so that's beautiful, and we've done this with teams. But like you said, when we talked about power, it is difficult because instead of working with one person where you'll get one answer to these questions, you're now working with, let's say, 8 people, and are therefore likely to get more than one different answer to these STOKeRS kind of questions. And of course, and that takes us back to what you said about decision making. How are decisions going to be made when you have 5, 6, 7, or 8 different answers to a question as innocent, quote unquote, as what do you want to focus on today, or what would success look like?
Yes. Yeah. So I think many coaches are really now embracing the idea that team coaching, as opposed to team facilitation or team training, is really about creating awareness and responsibility in the team. And the way we do that in one-to-one coaching, the way we do that in team coaching, is by creating a container for the work. What is it we're going to focus on today? How are we going to work together? The STOKeRS questions. And then by asking open questions. But straight away with a team, we're confronted with this dynamic of what do we do with the data that's generated? Whose data is it? And if we're not careful, and I've fallen into this trap far too many times, if I'm not careful, I ask the question, and you can picture it now, can't you? A team of half a dozen people, all responding, looking at me, giving me the responses to the questions. And it's like I'm holding a plate or a dish with their answers put on it. And I'm going, what do I do with that now? So the challenge as a team coach is, how do you keep that data with the team? And how are they going to make a decision on, for example, what the focus of the session is going to be when you have different perspectives? One way of keeping it with the team that I like to do is say, what do we need to focus on today? And as you answer that question, look at each other. You're not responding to me. Have the conversation with each other. Keep eye contact with each other. Yep. And if I'm in the room with them, I might pull my seat back slightly. Or on Zoom, I pull back slightly so that I'm less in their face, less in their eye contact zone.
Yeah, you could even take, again, this goes, contract for it, but you can contract for, the right to switch your own camera off at certain times during a coaching session to clearly signal that you want them to have a conversation amongst themselves. That's
such a beautifully simple tool. Yeah. And then there's this question about, the decision making. Who picks which answer the team's going to work with in this session? Let's imagine we've got this situation with a team of 8 people and we're asking them, so what do we need to focus on in today's session? How do you approach that in order to get one theme to work on, one topic to work on?
The way I approach it is by making sure that we've got some form of a decision-making process in place, that we have some understanding around who owns the agenda, right? And there's one useful tool that I've come across over the last few years, which is something called the authority matrix, which was developed by the late Richard Hackman.
Yes.
And so this is easy for people to Google. Just Google authority matrix, and then Richard Hackman, considered by many as one of the go-to experts on group processes and teams and organizations, who taught at Harvard University. And he has this authority matrix, which is which is a 4x4 kind of grid. And I won't go through all the details, but it sketches an interesting evolution from a manager-led team where most of the authority, as implied by the name, where most of the authority resides with the manager.
Yeah.
So the manager is responsible for setting the direction, for designing the team, for monitoring and managing the work. And the team may be responsible for execution and only execution. And then one step further along the grid, Hackman talks about a self-managing team where those responsibilities that I just described are starting to become shared 50-50. And a self-designing team, which would be the third step, the manager's responsibilities may be limited to setting the overall direction, but all the rest belongs to the team. And then in a self-governing team, all of what we've been talking about lies with the team. So yeah.
It's a fantastic matrix. So an example of a self-governing team might be, for example, the group of partners who are managing a legal practice or a consulting firm where there's no one person whose role gives them overall authority. Whereas a lot of corporates the authority is invested in the leader. So it's a leader-led team. And even if the leader's style is very collaborative and consensual, the organization's expectation is that the leader will generate clarity on the objectives for the team and the work of the team and the direction of travel for the team. So very different ways that leadership operates in those organizations.
Yeah. And that will influence how, decisions will be made during coaching sessions.
Yeah. So if you have a leader-led team, what do you do around getting a focus or agenda for a coaching session?
Right. Well, then it's quite straightforward. You can ask the leader.
Yeah, either up front.
And the leader will answer, and the leader will say, "Well, today I really want us to focus on on strengthening the relationships in this team."
Yeah.
And so it's clear.
Now the leader might share that up front. The leader might have consulted with team members. The leader might do that in the session. So if you were to ask the question as the coach, what do you want to focus on today? And you get the 8 different answers. In a leader-led team, I might ask the leader to say, so from what you've heard, what's your sense of what the primary focus needs to be for the session today? This can be a challenging one for coaches because I find that a lot of coaches, their own preference in terms of how power works is very collaborative and consensual. They kind of want equal decision-making power, but that's not how many organization systems work. And I think it's our job to work with the desired culture within the organization rather than try to get the organization to work with our own power preferences.
Yeah.
The harder one can be when you have a self-governing team. So when there is no one person to look to. It's less common that you'd have 8 team members, say, on a self-governing team, but you may do. So let's say you get the 8 different answers on what do you want to focus today in a team where there is no one leader. Then how would you approach that?
Well, then I think up front, there's a whole bunch of coaching to do around our decision-making processes.
That's right.
But which is probably a fascinating piece of work in and of itself, because you'll get to observe the team in action as they ponder that particular question. So, I mean, even though you could say you do that up front, it's already part of the whole team coaching process.
Team coaching process, yeah, I might do it up front. Or it may emerge through a conversation spinning, as we call it. A conversation goes around and around in circles because there's no one with the power authority to pick up a theme that's come out and say, let's focus on this one. In that instance, it's wonderful to use the meta skills, which are our methodology for change, which is presence, use of self, and active experiments. Is a great opportunity to invite an experiment and say, team, you've got 8 different ideas here for the focus for the session. How about an experiment? Let's try for the next 10 minutes. You try to shift from 8 different ideas to 1 and come up with one unifying theme. And then as a coach, you step back and let them work on their process, let them work on how they're going to do that.
It sounds complex. It's not easy. It is not easy, but it's super important. And I hope we're not making too much of it right now. I'm going to open a huge parenthesis and I'm going to close the huge parentheses almost immediately. Georgina, you remember the other day we were working with a group of coaches.
Yeah.
From a different kind of school of thought, and who didn't really do any contracting up front in the coaching session, who basically asked the team to, I think the question was, or the assignment for the team was, have a conversation amongst yourselves about anything, and would then observe the team. And it didn't really matter what the team was talking about. It was more about how they were talking about the things that they were talking about. So if it sounds like we're making a lot of this, note that there's different ways and that there's potentially simpler ways.
Yes, different schools and approaches. In that instance, that group of coaches are very clear on their approach and methodology. So they know what they're doing with that. It's unlikely to spin endlessly round in circles.
Yep.
Because they're paying attention to the process, not the content of the conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
And in field theory or systems idea, the team's process, the team's dynamic will emerge whenever we get out of the way. So if we get out of the way and we let their natural process emerge, we can see what's working or not working, or they can help them reflect on that. And then that gives us great opportunities for coaching to build greater capability. It's another fantastic way of working. I'm so glad you raised that, because sometimes it can sound like coaching's always about a grow model or a STOKeRS model. Yep. However, I would, in that instance, if that was my approach and methodology, I would be clear up front with the client about that's what they can expect.
Yeah, I love it. And that would fall under one of the 6 Ps, the professional P of the 6 Ps.
Of the big C, contracting. Otherwise, they might be expecting a facilitator and we turn up and say, just talk about anything. We're going to observe. That might be a step too far.
We're coming to the end of the time that we have here, but just wanted to throw in one more piece to think about when we're contracting with teams. So far we've talked a lot about different points in time at which you'll be contracting from a big C and then a small C and potential micro Cs along the way. But you're also going to be contracting probably with different stakeholders, with different people.
It's really common in team coaching, and it's probably the norm. There's some kind of multi-party, multi-stakeholder contract. So what are some of the stakeholders that you're thinking of here, Alan, the multi-party?
Well, I think so. There's going to be that you'll definitely have a contract with the team.
Yes.
You may have some form of contract or agreement with the team leader.
Yeah.
But all that has to sit probably, under the remit of the organization that the team belongs to. So you'll have some form of contract with the organization, whether that's with HR or
learning and development, organizational development, executive board.
I know some coaches, we get some of our work, not directly from clients, but from intermediate coaching agencies or coaching brokers. So there'll be a contract that they will have with the team and that they will have with you. Two different, so there can be quite a few different things to think about.
Yeah, that's something I hear about quite often, which is where the team coach has a particular approach that they prefer to work with, and that's how they know that they can be effective. And the coaching broker or agency has already written a proposal and sold in a program that offers a different approach, and that can be quite challenging to navigate the different frames of reference as to what team coaching will look like. And then the other one you might have be your contract with your supervisor, team coaching supervisor. And what's their style of supervision and what are you looking for? What sort of support are you looking for? You're looking for tools and exercises and approaches and what to do and what not to do. Or you're really looking to explore what's under your skin. Where are you triggered? Where's the aspects of yourself that you keep encountering when you're working with groups and teams, which is fascinating work to do. So we've probably run out of time today, and I'm aware that this topic we could talk about for hours. It's a huge topic.
Yeah. kind of boil it down for people, as we part today, remember, the first thing to remember is how important this is. If without good contracting, you can be the best team coach in the world, but there's bound to be all kinds of trouble along the way. Don't over-contract either. We said that really quickly at the beginning. We've talked a lot about contracting, but over-contracting may stifle the whole process. And then remember that to differentiate between this big C contract, and feel free to use the 6 Ps, or feel free to use any other approach that you may have come across. But remember the big C contract and then the little C contract. But remember that it's going to be difficult to arrive at a little C, so a contract for a specific little small piece of work, unless there's some clear contracting around how decisions are going to be made. And then remember that you're contracting with a whole bunch of different people.
Well put. And the other one I'd add to that list is remember the micro contracts, the little process contracts. Which are, things like we've got 10 minutes left. How do you want to use the time? What do you want from me in that time? We'll use those micro contracts frequently in coaching, and they're really valuable and important in team coaching. So that's it for us from today. Happy contracting. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode, where we're going to be talking about team coaching readiness and preparing for team coaching.
Looking forward to seeing you the next time. 4 down, 2 to go. See you soon, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I'm Georgina Woudstra.
And I am Allard Jong. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society at large.
To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationofcoaching.com. There you can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insight from the Coaching Perspectives magazine.